Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode. I'm so excited you are here. Today, I want to talk to you about how you can change your entire life in 5 years. And I picked that specific amount of time because I think that there is a lot of content about how you can change your life, and it's true. You can change your health, you can change your relationship status, you can change your career, you can change your habits. There's a lot that you can do. I think the problem that happens for people is that they want to change everything right now. And if they can't change it right now, then they never get started. And I think a big part of really choosing or deciding, making an intentional decision to change your life is to have a realistic timeline for how long that's going to take. And when you set yourself up with a realistic timeline, you actually set yourself up for success. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. The 3 things that I want you to really think about and focus on as you think about changing your life. Before we get started, I want to tell you about my own experience with this. Now it's been 10 years, but I know when I started this podcast, before I started it, I was in a place where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I felt really lost. I felt like there was no way I was going to replace my income as a lawyer. I was still really caught up in the perfectionism and the all or nothing thinking and a lot of the fears that I had. And after 5 years of doing this podcast, my entire life is different. I not only have this podcast and platform, I've created a business that makes multiple 6 figures where I work about 20 to 30 hours a week. I get to work on my own schedule. I get to do something that I'm so passionate about and so in love with and fulfills me very deeply. And I never would have thought that I would have had that when I started this podcast. And I want you to understand that it didn't happen in year 1. And a lot of the changes happened really slowly. They happened over time. Like it was like I did it for a year just doing interviews. I started kind of flirting with the idea of like, could I coach? Could I start a business from this? I allowed myself the time to kind of build that instead of thinking like, I need to make 6 figures in 6 months and all these other kind of BS marketing tactics that you see online. I allowed it to take the amount of time it was going to take. And slowly over that time, not only did I reach the goals that I wanted, I found a career that was really fulfilling to me. I found a way to make more money than I did as a lawyer. I found a job that allowed me the freedom and the flexibility that I wanted. But I fundamentally changed as a person through that time. In order to do this, I allowed myself to work on that fear of failure and the fear of being judged. I took up space. I put my face out there. I allowed myself to be criticized and, have the trolling comments and be okay with it. And that slowly changed who I was. It helped me eliminate my perfectionism. It helped me deal a lot with my people pleasing. That one's not eliminated just yet. It helped me deal with my imposter syndrome. And it allowed me to do that slowly. Like my nervous system would not have been able to deal with all of that and work through everything I needed, to work through, which by the way, I'm still working through a lot. If I had to do everything in 6 months, if I had to change my whole life in a year and think that, if that didn't happen, then it wasn't worth it or I failed somehow, like giving my body and my brain and my nervous system the time to acclimate, to learn something new, to integrate things, to, practice what I was preaching, to try new things, to fail, is what allowed me to succeed, is what allowed me to build this business and to continue growing. And I think about that as I think about my next goals. I never set goals for like, it has to be done this year because I know it's likely not realistic. And it likely comes from this place of like, I think when I get there, I'm going to be happier. And so I want to get there faster, as opposed to like, how is this just the next way that I'm going to grow? And how can I give myself the time and energy and capacity that I need in order to grow into that version of myself? And so I just say this because I've now not only seen it with myself, but with all of the people that I coach. One of the things that I coach on in my program are these 5-year plans. And so I want to walk you through it as well and how you can change your life in 5 years. So There is the famous quote, I think it's by Bill Gates, where it's we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in a decade. No truer statement has ever been said, right? I think for a lot of us, you can even shorten that down, right? We overestimate what we can do in a month. We underestimate what we can do in a year. If you think about, let's say, a weight loss journey or a health journey, a lot of us want to have results within a month. We want to go hard. We want to go 5 days a week, and we're going to go on this strict diet, and then we burn out and we don't get anywhere. But if you made your health journey a year, if you started saying hey, by the end of the year, I want to see some change, you would stick with it more. You would make sure you wouldn't be discouraged when nothing happens after a month because you wouldn't be expecting something to happen after a month. You would give your body the time it needed to actually start showing you the change, right? It's the same thing when you increase kind of that timeline. When you give yourself a decade, let's say, for a lot of you, let's say you want to change your career. If you really looked at it as what am I going to work on over the next 10 years? And we don't even have to go that long. We say 5 years. You give yourself ample time to then actually have the space to be able to work on it. And you give yourself the time to build up to the thing that you want. And so for so many people I see that sort of give up on change because they think it's not going to happen. The only issue is that they've just gave themselves a shortened timeline. And it was arbitrary, right? Nobody's saying you have to have things changed within a year or within a month. We just decide if it's not going to happen by that time, then it's not going to happen. And that's the first thing that I want you to really be aware of is that we all have this all or nothing thinking. It's the way that our brains are sort of wired, but you have to catch yourself. You have to see when you're doing it so that you can use your more rational brain to override it. For a lot of us, we really have if I'm not going to be able to, have the body I want in a month, then it's not worth it. We don't think that maybe consciously, but we just decide if I'm not going to see huge changes right now, or if I can't commit 100% to this, then it's not worth doing. And I think that is the biggest killer of your dreams over anything else, because it's not true. It's not true that if I can't do it all, then it's not worth doing. Doing a little bit is actually the only way to hit your goals, is staying consistent over time. And that requires you to do a manageable amount. It requires you to figure out how much capacity you have and allow yourself to just do that and be okay with that. And know that it doesn't have to be all. I don't have to be this fitness influencer who's working out 4 hours a day, right? I don't have to quit my job and have a new job and become successful at it within 6 months. Nobody says that it has to happen in that timeline. So why am I setting that arbitrary deadline? And I think for a lot of us, it's because we're so terrified that what we're picking is the wrong thing, or it's not going to work, or we're going to fail. And so we're almost this 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Okay, I'm going to try it for a month. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to be see, it wasn't going to work. And I'm going to give up because I don't want to have to actually give it my all and see if it fails. And I'm here to encourage you, give it your all and see if it fails. If you're going to do it full out, commit to it. Commit that it might take a year, 2 years, 5 years. But if that's how I ultimately want to change my life, if I want to change an aspect of my life, I'm willing to put in the time that it's going to take in order to get there. And so I want you to be really aware of when you want to make a change, when your brain is telling you if this doesn't happen within this certain amount of time, it's not worth doing. If I can't give it 100% of my attention, then it's not worth doing. If I can't, go full out, which I see even with when people want to start businesses or people want to, maybe do art or focus on a passion project, they constantly think that they can't do it because they don't have enough time. And the belief is that you need kind of these perfect conditions and you need all this extra time and you need to spend hours and hours building this thing, and you don't. The reality is that in this day and age, there's lots of ways to do things on the side in short spurts, spending 2 hours a week, let's say, on your business, right? For a lot of people, they think, well, that's not worth it. But if you look over time, 2 hours a week, let's say over a year of 52 weeks, That's over 100 hours that you're spending on a project, that you're spending on this business. And so, yes, it may not take off the way that somebody that's going to spend 8 hours a day on it would, but who cares? You're just going to take a little bit longer. That's your path. And that is okay. It doesn't have to look like everybody else's. It doesn't have to be someone else's path. It can be like someone else might get a business up in a year and you're going to take 3 years. It's still worth it for you. In 3 years' time, you're going to look back and be like, I'm so proud of myself for starting 3 years ago because now I have a full-fledged business. Now I have a business that's making money. Now I've learned how to do this stuff while keeping my job, right? When I didn't have to take on really the financial burden of jumping into entrepreneurship. There are so many ways to do these things when you don't have this mindset of like all or nothing. It has to be all right now or it's not worth it. So I want you to like really be on the lookout for that. And that leads, like what I'm talking about leads to the second thing, which is really understanding the power of the compound effect. If you haven't read Darren Hardy's book about that, I highly recommend reading it because I think it does such a great job of really showing a lot of instances where the really small things add up to make huge changes. And I think we overlook that. We think we have to make big sweeping changes. We have to quit our job and go full-time in our business. And, that's the only way to do it. And not only is that not the only way, it's usually not the best way because it's going to put an unreasonable amount of stress on you. It's going to stress you out to the point where you likely can't focus on doing the things you need to do. And so learning how to do things in small increments over time is what will not only allow you to stick with it, but actually start kind of creating this snowball effect, right? So when we're talking about like if you commit 2 to 3 hours a week to work on a project, to work on your business, and then you do that week after week after week after week, it starts snowballing. Like maybe in the beginning, those actions don't seem like they're returning that much of a result for you because you're just kind of starting with the foundation. But over time, when you have your system set up, when you have, let's say, kind of the foundation set up, when you don't need to be setting up like social media and websites and stuff, those 3 hours start accumulating. And like you start, let's say, putting out content and you start doing sales and you start reaching out to people, you start getting a much bigger return on your investment for those 2 or 3 hours. It starts, like I said, snowballing into something that has a lot of momentum. In his book, Darren Hardy gives a lot of different examples. One is like when you look at, maybe an unhealthy habit, when we start with something really small. Let's say we just want to, add one thing to our day. We're going to have an extra latte. Or let's say we, instead of going for a walk at night, we decide we're going to just watch an extra, show on Netflix. In the short term, even in a month, 2 months, 6 months, there's really not that big of a change. And so you think like, oh, it's not a big deal. But over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's a huge change. It's a huge ripple effect. Not just in maybe you become more sedentary, you start having more like, let's say, back pain, you start gaining some weight, you start losing muscle. Those walks that you would take would probably help your mental health. Maybe you go on walks with your spouse and it would help your relationship. It would be the time to have conversations. Maybe it starts making you feel less lonely because that's when you call your friends and you have these conversations. There's so many things that are wrapped up in maybe taking a 30-minute walk instead of like the choice to make a walk instead of sitting and watching another Netflix show. Now, I have nothing against watching Netflix and doing things to numb your brain. I think we all need it. I think you don't need to be productive all the time. I just want you to think about the concept of the compound effect. Over time, what are these little actions that I'm doing and how are they going to create the results that I have in my life? One of the other examples he gives in that book is I think he was talking about like the English cycling team. I can't remember if it was English or one of these national cycling team. And he was talking about how the coaches came in and this team had never won. And they came and they didn't really change big things, but they started changing really small things like the pillows that the athletes slept on, and, like the environment in which their bedroom, like the private plane that they would fly on was, and the amount of oxygen they were getting, and all of these like minor kind of tweaks. And they ended up winning like the Tour de France like 5 years in a row or something. But it was fascinating that it wasn't that like they were training, 40 hours more a week and they had to push their bodies more. It was like looking at where are small ways that I can make a change that can overall increase, the sleep that we get and the energy that we have. And, they would like change the seats of their bikes like a little bit to be more ergonomically correct. And like those little things are what added up in order to make them this championship team. And so I say that to say, like, when you think about it in your own life, it actually is one of the most important concepts to really understand, because it takes off the pressure of having to change everything all at once. It takes off the pressure of like, I have to be a completely different person if I'm going to change my life. Because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you're not going to be a different person. Your brain's not going to change all of a sudden. And you're not all of a sudden going to be the most motivated person that's disciplined, that sticks to things all the time. You're the same person with the same brain, and you don't need to be that different if you start taking small changes. Like if you think about, let's say if you want to pay off debt so that you can quit your job. If you start by only saving $100, let's say from each paycheck, if you stop making it this big deal of like, I need to save $100,000 in order to do something, but you make it a bite-sized thing of like, can I save $10 a day? I don't know, that's a random kind of example. But if I could I do something where maybe it isn't as big of a lift for me? I'm more likely to stick to it. I'm more likely to continue this. I'm more likely to then see the wins and then stick to it more. I'm more likely to change my own self-concept to become a person of like, I can save. I can manage my money. I do understand this. I do stick to this, which gets me excited to save more, to do bigger things, to maybe make some investments. Like when you start kind of stacking these little wins on top of each other, they grow into becoming really massive wins. What happens, unfortunately, for so many of us is we go into this, I'm going to go hard. I'm going to go hard for 2 weeks. I'm going to cut out everything. I'm going to save all of my money. I'm never going to eat out. And then that's a miserable way to live. And so then we give up. And so I want you to really think about the compound effect and how you can implement that in your life when you want to change it, especially if you want to change your career. Maybe you can't quit this year or next year even, right? Can you quit in 5 years? Can you quit in 3 years, right? Can you quit in, 7 years? If you can, we need to start now with small things. We don't need to change everything, but we need to start thinking about, are there people I want to network with? Are there new skills I want to gain? Like slowly here and there. Is there a class that I want to take to brush up on my coding skills? Are there people that I want to get in contact with? Do I want to explore some other interests that I have? Do I want to give myself a couple of hours on Saturdays to, work on the passions that I have? Whatever it might be, when you allow yourself the time to kind of explore and grow and work on things, you actually set yourself up to be able to make big changes later. And so that leads me to the last thing, which is these 5-year plans. When you really look at these concepts of getting rid of all or nothing thinking and really thinking about the compound effect of little actions over a long period of time, right? How can I be relatively consistent? When I say consistent, I don't mean every day I have to do the same exact thing, or every week, even if it's a small commitment. Even if I say I'm only going to work on my business for 2 hours a day, that doesn't mean I'm going to do it every week. Some weeks I'm going to fall off. Some weeks I'm going to get sick. I'm going to have life stuff happen. Fine. It's the culmination, right? It's like the cumulative effect. Can I keep coming back to it? Can I keep bringing myself back and grow this over time? So both of those things I want you to think about when you think about these 5-year plans that I teach a lot of my clients. I want you to just take whatever it is that you want to do, even if it's just a crazy dream. You don't have to, you can do this exercise just for fun. It doesn't have to be a real 5-year plan. But I want you to just see the power in it. So I want you to take whatever dream you might have, and I want you to try to break it down within 5 years instead of a year. I want you to really think about what would the steps be. Let's say, as an example, let's say I want to write a book, okay? I've always wanted to be an author, and I want to have a book published by kind of the traditional publishing houses. Okay, that's my goal. A lot of people take a goal like that and it's like, I want to be an author. And then they immediately get overwhelmed by all the steps that they have to, go through in order to be a published author. And they start thinking about all the things they don't know how to do. And so they get completely overwhelmed and then they give up on it, right? What I want you to do is like, if you take that goal and you break it down into 5 years, right? You look at it as like, okay, the vision is to be an author. Now, if I work backwards, you could do this anyway. What I would recommend is like at first brainstorm, what are the steps that it would take to become an author, right? Like if I was going to be an author, I would have to have an agent. I would have to have, get a deal from a publishing house. I would need to know how to write, whether that's fiction or nonfiction. I would need to like brush up on my writing skills. I would maybe need like an editor. I don't know. I don't know why I picked that analogy because I don't know how to become a published author, but just bear with me. When you start looking at, okay, if I was going to do that in 5 years, if I didn't have to get it published today, let me either work backwards or work forwards, whatever works with your dream. What if in the first year, all I had to do was work on my writing? That's all I had to do. I had to take a creative writing course online maybe. I had to spend, 2 hours a week writing short stories. Maybe I want to get involved in some writing groups online. I want to join some, writers' Facebook groups or Reddit groups. And I'm going to spend some time exploring, like, what does it take to become a published author? That's all I have to do in an entire year, that's manageable. That's a manageable amount of things to do. Right? I can like find some groups. I can learn more about what's needed. It's kind of like the information gathering stage. I can start working on my craft. I can like start taking it seriously. Like, okay, I need to learn how to write better. So this is what I'm going to do. And then maybe in year 2 is when I want to go to writing retreats or sign up for a writing coach, or I don't know what people do, but get more serious. Maybe I want to start submitting short stories. Maybe I want to look for places where I can get my writing critiqued and I can get edited by other writers and I can do it for other writers so I can get a better understanding. Maybe I can take more courses. Maybe at the time I can start outlining an idea or outlining all of my ideas and picking an idea for a novel, or, if I'm going to do, let's say, my memoir, I can start outlining that. If I only have to do that in year 2, right? It's like year 1, maybe I'm saving money to go to a writing retreat in year 2. Again, it becomes so much more doable. Then in year 3, I'm going to work on really like the bare bones of my first draft. By that point, I will have been in these groups. I will have gone to these writing retreats. I likely will have networked a lot more to get an understanding of like how you find a agent, how you find, how you start pitching publishing houses. Maybe that's the year I start looking at the actual process of getting my book in front of different agencies in order to get signed by someone. Maybe that's when I start looking at creating more of a pitch. Okay, like I don't have to worry about that right now. That's not something I have to do. I have to do that in 2 years, and I will learn so much more in this process as I put myself out there towards this dream of becoming an author, right? Year 4 is maybe when I get an agent and when we start pitching and when we start, maybe I have a draft and I get an editor and I work on that draft to make it a, better version where I'm going to pitch it to different publishing houses. All of it becomes a lot more manageable when the dream isn't something that has to get done in year 1. When it's not like I have to figure out all of publishing and I have to get an agent and I have to become a really good writer and I have to network with everybody and I have to know how I'm going to I have to know the idea and I have to have everything outlined, and that's insanely overwhelming. And so it's not to say that you can't be a published author. You absolutely can. But if you have no history in writing and you have no background or, network in that world, it likely will take you more than a year. And that's okay. Because guess what? You got a lot of life to live. So why not just stretch it out? Why not give yourself the time to actually be successful and to give yourself the time to learn and to grow? I'm telling you, when you start looking at your dreams in 5-year kind of increments, when you start thinking like, okay, if my next goal is like, I want to have a business up in 5 years, it becomes so much more doable. Instead of these kind of pipe dreams that people sell on like Instagram, where it's like you can have a business up and running and make 6 figures in the first year. I hate seeing those. Like I love people like being encouraged to go into entrepreneurship, because I do think it's much more viable for a lot of people that don't see it as an option. I think so many more people could have their own businesses, but they're too scared to kind of think about it. And so I love encouraging people to think about it as an option, but I hate that the culture is like this get rich quick scheme, because it takes time, and that time is going to pass, and you don't have to dedicate your whole life to it. So like, what if we just look at it realistically? Like anything else, right? Like if you're going to become a lawyer or a doctor, it's going to take years. You don't just like do something for 6 months, take a course, and then become a doctor. Like it's going to take a lot of training. And when you think about other things in your life as well, what if you gave yourself the same space to have that, to allow yourself to grow into that dream? I know when I quit the law, I remember I gave myself a year to figure out, quote unquote, what I wanted to do with my life. And I had told myself like, okay, we'd figured out kind of the finances with my husband. And I thought, I'm going to give myself a year. If I don't figure it out, I have to go back to the law. Now at the time that seemed reasonable. Obviously it was completely arbitrary. And I think one of the best things that happened to me is that I didn't figure it out in the first year. And I got towards the end of the year, and you know, I spent most of that year with a baby. And so not shocking that you don't have a lot of extra time to kind of figure out a career when you're taking care of a newborn and an infant and, you know, going into the toddler phase. But I think the best thing happened because I was forced to grapple with, now what? You gave yourself this arbitrary timeline. The timeline is up and you don't want to go back. So now what? And I really had to question, like, why did I just choose a year? It wasn't financially that we needed me to go back at that time, even though I kind of wanted to believe that it was. It was simply because I was scared of like, well, if it's been a whole year and I can't figure it out, then that means it's never going to happen, or I have no idea what I want, or I can't be trusted with this type of a decision, or whatever other bullshit my brain wanted to give me. Is like, I thought I was kind of whipping myself into shape. Like, okay, you get a year, that's what you get. And if you don't have something by then, you got to like grow up, you know? I don't know what I was thinking. And then I didn't. And I was like, well, now we're at a year. Now what? And I think that the best thing that I did was be like, okay, maybe a year wasn't realistic. Maybe I needed more time to take care of my son, to really stave off the burnout that I was feeling, to explore what I actually like, to figure out who I really am. Maybe it takes more time. And I think that when I realized that, and I realized like there's no reason to give yourself this arbitrary deadline. Nobody was looking to see like whether you're quote unquote successful or not in that time. It's just you. It's just your own pressure. It forced me to kind of slow down and be like, what if it just takes as long as it takes? What if you're going to do this as long as it takes for you to find the thing that you want to do? And I'm so glad I did, because that did allow me the time and space to be like, I don't need to force this. I could get another job if I needed to financially. I'll get another job while I still continue this exploration of who am I and what is it that I want and what do I want to work on? And we come kind of full circle back to like when I started this podcast, it really was with no intention of like, I didn't know what it was going to come of it. I didn't have the idea of like a full-fledged business. I didn't like have a business plan and know exactly where it was going to go. I just gave myself the time to work on it slowly and allow it to build and see what I liked about it and see what I didn't and grow it organically and then add different parts and let my nervous system catch up and do things that were really scary and allow myself to grow. And over time, my entire life changed. I'm a completely different person than I was. just in how I approach life and how I think about life and the things I go after and what I let myself explore and experiment with. And so I'm just grateful for my past self that allowed me the time and space to change in that way. And I want you to give yourself that too. There's no rush. I know we live in a culture where everything is rushed and when you're basically programmed to believe that you have to be a success by 25 or it's too late. But it's all a lie. You have time. You have so much time to change and grow and learn more about yourself and explore and become a different person and try different things. And the more you give yourself the time to grow into that, the more opportunity you allow yourself. Because there's so much that you can do. You just might not be able to do it in 6 months, and that's okay. So expand that timeline. Figure out what you want to do in the next 5 years. Get rid of the all or nothing thinking. Start doing things in small baby steps that compound effect and watch your life change. All right, my friends, I hope this was helpful, and I will be back next week with another episode. If you want help with these 5-year plans, and if you want help kind of learning how to do the compound effect in your own life, you can join me in my membership, the Quitter Club. You can go to lessonsfromaquitter.com/quitterclub, where you can learn more, and that's where we do all of this work in depth together. All right, my friends, I hope to see you in there. If not, I'll see you next week for another episode.